Mama said, Mama said, Mama said that. Mama said that. My mama said that.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
Go to Matthew chapter 20 as we continue on talking about what did Jesus say? What did Jesus say about that? I know we've covered some pretty gnarly topics. I now have my right lateral limit. Not to meet or exceed this position. I know we've covered some pretty intensive topics on stuff that Jesus talked about our position in the kingdom. Talked about that week number 1, and week number 2 we talked about divorce, relationships, and marriage, and all of that good fun stuff. Right? That was a happy message. Yeah, eunuchs. Yeah. Last week, anybody tell me what we talked about? Don't pull the weeds. That's right, the weeds and the wheat. So this week, we're going to talk about not so much what Jesus said, but about what my mama said. My mama said. I'm like, what? Yeah, I know Jesus said, but my mama said. You're going, okay. My mama said, but, well, let's find out. Let's see what mama had to say. So we're going to start in verse 17. And Jesus sets the stage here by foretelling his death again. He speaks about his coming death and pending doom again. Thanks, man. 17. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked, flogged, and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day." Now, we know how this story ends. So that whole thing of being raised on the third day is really, really good news. For them at that time, they're like, I can't wrap my mind around being raised on the third day, but I can focus very heavily on the fact that you're going to be mocked and flogged and crucified. Like, we understand that. We understand what crucifixion is in the Roman Empire, right? Not every criminal, not everybody was crucified in the Roman Empire. It was basically anybody who was causing a threat to the Roman government that needed to be made an example out of. That's who was crucified. So it was pretty heinous, but Jesus sets the stage with this. He talks about this specifically. Then we move down to verse 20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee, who are James and John, okay? These two brothers right here, James and John. The mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right and one at your left, in your kingdom." Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." Yeah, we can do that. He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant. But it is for those whom it is, or for whom it has been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, this is the other 10 disciples, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." That's some pretty deep words right there, Jesus said. I mean, we could sit and think about that all day. or for 6 or 7 hours like I have reading into this. But there in verse 20, this is the mother of the sons of Zebedee, or as Jesus named these guys, the sons of thunder. Okay? The sons of thunder. This is John and James. And, I love this, right? If we were to go to Luke in the 9th chapter, you don't have to turn there now, but what you would find is you catch a little bit of a glimpse of the character of these two guys, right? These two brothers, like knucklehead brothers. All right? Jesus is with the disciples in Luke chapter 9. I'll tell you kind of how they, just to set the stage a little bit for you, kind of give you an idea what these guys were like. Jesus and the disciples are heading to Jerusalem, right? They did this a lot. They went to Jerusalem a lot. And Jesus said, hey, we're going to go to Jerusalem, but instead of going around Samaria, we're going to go right through it. And the Samaritans and the Jews, okay, there was this huge kind of like racism thing that happened. For those of you who were around when I preached about how one of the things Jesus said and talked about is racism. But they hated each other is the main thing, and Jews basically just didn't cut through Samaria. To them, it was like going through the hood or the ghetto, right? They're like, we're not going to do this. And but Jesus said, hey guys, don't worry about it. I set up a place for us to stay on our way to Jerusalem and Samaria. So he sends a couple guys ahead, and they come back and they go, no, they figured out that we're Jews and that we're going to Jerusalem, so they said we couldn't stay there. So the sons of Zebedee, James and John, you know what they asked Jesus? They're like, hey, can we just go ahead and call fire down from heaven and like totally consume them and their village and just let them die a terrible, heinous death? Because they wouldn't give us a place to stay? Yeah. And it says Jesus rebuked them. All right? So this is like, we look at our modern day and we go, well, look at this is terrible what's happened in the Middle East. Terrorism and that mentality of terrorism. These two guys right here are like, hey, they wouldn't give us a place to stay. So let's just bring hellfire, brimstone, on these people's lives and just completely destroy them, because Jesus is like, no, it's cool. We'll just find another place to stay. No need to annihilate them like Sodom and Gomorrah. So you got to kind of get a glimpse of these guys, right? They're just like, they're kind of like, nah. So Jesus calls them the sons of thunder. So their mom, so here's moms. She comes to Jesus and is like, hey, when you come into your kingdom, can you make sure that my boys go on ahead and sit one to your right and one to your left, like being close to you? But you got to keep in mind the mentality. Let's look, like the cross, this hasn't happened yet. Right? Jesus has not gone to the cross. So let's still look at the mentality of most of the Jews at that time of what the Messiah and the Savior is. Okay? They're thinking like this is going to be a literal king, right? A guy who comes down, big mean beard, swole like me, wearing a crown, overthrowing the government, overthrowing the military, and establishing this kingdom like we think of kingdom on the earth. And so she's like trying to put in a good word for her son. She's like, these are my baby boys. Can you make sure that they're with you at that time? And Jesus comes back. He says, listen, you don't understand what you're asking for. You don't understand what you're asking. I thought this to be kind of funny because you guys know that for like 7 or 8 years before being a pastor here, Teddy and I did youth ministry. And the by far the most difficult, heinous, terrible part of doing youth ministry is not youth and not their problems, their parents. Oh, Jesus, help me. And I can't tell you how many times I met the mother of the sons of Zebedee. I can't even begin to tell you how many times. Here comes the old raggedy hoopty pulling up in front of the church, right? And this pile of kids gets out. And, and they're all telling me, Mr. Frank, you got to go over to the car. Man, Moms wants to talk to you. You got to go over to the car. And I come over to the car, and, and there she is in a robe and one fake eyelash on and the makeup still smeared from the night before. She's looking like a raccoon and curlers in her hair or whatever. And I'm here, I'm dropping my boys off right now. I'm like, but I need you to make sure that, that they learn the Gospels and they learn this and that. And I'm like, you coming in to church? Oh, no, I'm not coming to church. I got to go home, finish, get ready. I'm going to breakfast. What do you mean you're going to breakfast? You know what I mean? Pulling up. And then later on to get the follow-up emails. Now in the world of social media, the Facebook messages, I can stalk you on Facebook, and I can tell you, hey, make sure that my daughter is learning this, and she got a problem with that, and her dad ain't acting right, and I need you to this, that, and other. And I'm like, where are you at? Parents? Where are you? I can't even begin to tell you how many times I have met this mother right here. And then, hold on. And then I had this terrible, awful, heinous misconception that all that would stop when I became the senior pastor of a church. When I began shepherding adults. I cannot even begin to tell you how I still get emails and Facebook messages from mamas of grown people. Yeah. Yep. I love my mom. My mom loves me. Your mothers all love you. They want nothing but the best for you. There's no difference in that regard of the mother of the sons of thunder here. She wanted the absolute best for her kids. Now, I don't know if this was the boys sitting down, talking with mom and going, hey, can you put a good word in for us, Or I don't know if this was mom going, yeah, you boys sit down, because I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to Jesus. And I'm going to tell him, this is what I need for you. And I don't know if she was a godly woman, not a godly woman. I don't have any idea her scope of the relationship, but just the implication in looking at the scripture here, I'm telling you, I'm like, man, I've met this woman before. I probably have a couple emails from her in my inbox right now. So moving down, so we kind of get the stage set now. Keep in mind, Jesus just got done speaking about how he's going to go to the cross. And she hasn't put this together yet, that later on, that Jesus would say, just as I went to the cross to follow me, we all need to pick up your cross, right? And, that I'm going to suffer on behalf of the kingdom, and therefore all of you are going to suffer on behalf of the kingdom, right? She's not putting this together. So Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. This is in verse 22. It says, you do not know what you're asking. And then he doesn't ask her this. He actually turns to the boys and he says, are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? Now, kind of given the character of these two guys, right? They come back, we are able. Yeah, we are able. Right? And you know what, all I can think of is in the film 300, when the 300 Spartans are getting ready to go off to the Battle of Thermopylae. You have Leonidas standing there with his captain, and he's checking out the troops. He's checking out the 300 he's got, right? And they're all standing there, and they're stone cold, and they've got like the most awesome military bearing. And the one young dude, right, this young cat with like kind of hippie hair and stuff, he like pounds his staff into the ground. He turns to Leonidas, and he says, we are with you, sir! We are with you, sire, to the death! And I'm going, oh, man. Oh, sons of thunder. Yeah, we are able, Lord. No, I'm like picturing, these dudes are like, bring it back! But later on, we would find out these dudes put their money where their mouth is. Right? In Acts chapter 12, it says Herod had James killed by the sword. So we knew, man, he was willing to take it to the cross. He was willing to take it to whatever way. And then you read in Jewish history, and it's like maybe folklore, maybe history, maybe tradition or whatever, that he didn't actually die when he got stabbed with the sword. So they drug him behind a horse until his insides came out. Right? And he's praising God the whole time. I'm like, man, that dude is tough as nails. Now John, on the other hand, we know that John outlived everybody. Right? But talk about... men, which means you just live longer to suffer more persecution, right? This supposedly is the guy who gets boiled in oil and lives. And then they're like looking at him, they're like, well, you didn't die and you got boiled, so let's send you to Patmos, where he writes the book of Revelation. So these guys, their hearts were there. They were like, oh, we are able. We are with you, Lord. Absolutely. So these dudes are ready to do it. They're ready to do it. So they understand what their mother is asking. Their mother doesn't understand what she's asking. But then the other piece of this that also later on Jesus would address in the 25th chapter of Matthew is he speaks about the sheeps and the goats, right? The sheeps and the goats. The sheep's on his right, the goats on his left. Talking about how the kingdom is divided, how we're judged. That's a whole other parable. Something else Jesus spoke about. So there's multiple things. Like he's going, listen, moms, you don't understand that I'm about to go to the cross and I'm about to suffer persecution, and that my kingdom isn't what you think my kingdom is, and that you want your sons to be on my right and on my left, and I don't think you're fully understanding that either, what that really means. But I know he sees her heart and understands that she is petitioning for her kids, right? Advocating or interceding for her sons that they would be close to Jesus and his kingdom. I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hand if your mom has sent me an email. I'm not even going to look up. Yeah. So Jesus goes on here and he talks about this. Oh man, yeah, I'm telling you, man, I get jammed up in the corner. Sometimes you see me jammed up in the corner, and that's typically somebody's mom. Yeah. I need my little girl I need you to make sure my little girl learned this and that she knows this. And what do you mean your little girl? She's big as me. What are you talking about? And so what's really kind of funny about this, though, is let's keep going down. So they said we are able, and this is verse 23, and he goes on and he says, you will drink my cup, and sit at my right hand and my left is not for me to grant, but for those whom it has been prepared by my Father. Now, this is it seems like, it may seem contradictory, but it's really not contradictory because previous to this, what did Jesus say? He said, nobody comes to the Father except through me. And nobody comes to me except who's drawn by the Father. All right? He's talking about his oneness with the Father. It's like, man, it's like we're going to get you one way or the other. You're going to come to me and go to the Father, or the Father's going to draw you. You're going to come to me and go to the Father. Right? The Holy Spirit's going to move on you, and you're going to come to me, or you're going to go to the Father and draw, or whatever. I don't care. It's three pieces, right? It's just a circle. No matter where you go, it's God. So Jesus is like, I can stand here and tell you, I can put you wherever you want, but that's not for me to decide. What's the most important piece? Is that you're standing in front of me and that you're near to me and close to me. Now, we continue on in verse 24, and it says, when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. Just disgusted. Just like, ugh. Come on, guys. I've heard messages preached about this. I've read studies and expository stuff on this, and some pastors will even use this for a Mother's Day message, the undying and just bleeding heart of a mother and the love for her children. And I'm like, that's great. That's great. But it's like, to some degree, it's like, come on, man. Why are you sending your mama to talk to Jesus? When I was 19, it was my second year in the Marine Corps. I was getting ready to deploy over to Okinawa. Caleb was just born. Teddy and I had moved off station at 29 Palms. And back to our hometown where Teddy was going to be staying and finishing her junior year of college. And it was just funny because at 19, I was already a couple years into a career. I was supporting myself and my family. I was married and I had a son. And we were maintaining, and life was pretty good and was pretty even keel. But it was such kind of an oxymoronic thing in that regard of coming back home to my hometown, which seemed like had just remained in stasis. And the people there had remained in stasis, i.e. a lot of my buddies had remained in stasis. 2 years after we graduated from high school, still a lot of these guys were not doing anything different than we were doing in high school. It's like, man, you still look the same and you still do the same. You go to the same places and you drive the same streets and you hang out the same, like everything is the same. Like there's no moving forward. Now I understand that the military kind of puts you in this little bit of an accelerated pace of life, things happen fast. I looked back at those 2 years and I was like, whoo, I have done more and been more places in those 2 years than I had been in the 10 before. So my one buddy who had already been in college and dropped out of college and then got a job and moved out and then lost his job and moved back home, and he made a suggestion. He said, man, let's before you ship out to go overseas, let's go to Las Vegas. Let's just go and do everything there that's free. I said, okay, let's go. And so there was a few of us, and my other buddy who had never left home, he had graduated and had pursued his career in customer service via Burger King. Yeah. Yeah. He had never left home. And so the three of us are talking about this. We're like, man, this is a great idea. Let's go do this. We can't drink. I'm not going to gamble because that costs money. We're just going to go. We're going to just have a good time with my buddies and everything. Teddy was on board. It was great. It was awesome. It was nothing I had to leave in Vegas. Okay? I can tell you all about it. Nothing I had to leave in Vegas. And so we're getting ready to pack up. We're getting ready to go. And we're going to get my buddy's car. We go to our other buddy's house. We knock on the door. We're like, hey, man, you ready to go? He's like, yeah, I'm not going. What do you mean you're not going? Well, Mom said no. What do you mean Mom said no? You're a grown man. Like 19 years old. Like, what do you mean Mom said no? But, he didn't support himself. He hadn't moved. His mentality and his lifestyle and everything was the same 2 years prior to that as it was now. And you want to talk about indignant. I was like, what are you? Come on, other buddy, get in the car. We're going to. I was like, I just couldn't wrap my mind around this because I was a husband, I was a father, I was a military man, I was a career man, I had my own place, I was sending my wife to college. It was all this stuff, and it was just like, what do you mean your mom said no? Indignant. So I think about that experience in my life, and I apply that here, and I look how the other 10 are looking at the sons of thunder, and like, hey, you two hotheads who want to burn down a whole village, who have this terrorist mentality. Out of nowhere, here comes your mom talking to Jesus. Hey, can you make sure my sons are this and this and this and this and my boys and everything? It's like, and of course, what are the other 10? Indignant. What are you doing, man? What's your mom doing here? What's your mom doing here? So Jesus goes on and he speaks a little bit more after seeing that here comes mom. He addresses the boys. Here comes the 10 indignant other disciples. But he called them to him and he said, come here, guys. This is verse 25. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. Right? Right? Mm-hmm. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. And even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus begins clearing up the whole situation. And he says, you guys got a real false understanding of what my kingdom is really going to be about. He's like, I'm not going to destroy and take down a government. I'm not going to create some kind of military coup. I'm definitely not going to let these two guys burn down a city or a village. All of this stuff. We're in the 20th chapter of Matthew. At this point, right, Jesus' ministry has gone on he's like, if you don't know what I'm about by this time, you should know that what I'm about, that I'm a different kind of king, and that the kingdom is based on these other and different kind of values that involve going in and doing like disaster relief and help in villages and not burning them down and stuff like that, right? But he also makes a really good point with moms right here, with the mother of the sons of thunder. And he says, listen. He says, it goes like this. It goes, no one comes to the Father except through me. It's not that no one comes to the Father except through your mother who comes through me who goes to the Father. There is no other advocate, right? there is no other intercessor. As a little kid, we base our faith and our beliefs and everything not so much on Scripture, but base that off of what we see our fathers do and what we see our mothers do and what our parents believe. And we live very vicariously through the faith of our parents, or the lack thereof the faith of our parents. And that begins to form our identity. Because it's hard when we're young to understand and to grasp the concept of establishing and having a solid identity in Jesus. But Jesus makes a point here. He's saying, look guys, now James is a young dude. John is a young guy. These guys are fairly young, so they're kind of like knuckleheads. You know? But he makes the point and he says, look, you guys, your position in the kingdom of heaven is not predicated off of what your mama says. Years ago, we were small group leaders. Teddy and I were small group leaders of a church, of a small church that was really awesome. And we had a family come that was in the midst of getting divorced. It was a dad and a mom and a little girl. And the little girl, I think, was about, at the time, I think was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And they still lived together, and they were trying to negotiate this. They were in a process of trying to separate. It was like the most kind of legalistic, procedural divorce that I've ever seen. She was absolutely annihilated and destroyed. So, of course, she comes to church, and because she's looking to get near to God. Her husband is a complete non-believer. And so they're at the small group, and we're talking, and we begin talking about salvation. And we begin talking about eternity, and we begin talking about our relationship with God. And you know, if you ever want to walk into a room and throw a proverbial grenade and walk out, just walk in and go, hey, who here is saved? And then walk away, right? And come back to find who's going like this to somebody else. It's a simple question. Who's saved? And man, talk about the debate and the argument and the conversation and the stuff that arises from that. So it was kind of funny because this guy, the dad, the husband of this family getting divorced, is making his argument, I'm saved. Well, of course, his soon-to-be ex-wife, right, very cordially says, yeah, no, you're not. And one of those very, cordial and comfortable arguments began to rise between the two of them in the middle of the small group. And it was funny because finally his driving home point to the argument was he stood up and he said, listen. Right? Yeah. Listen. He says, when I was 5, we went to the Catholic Church and my mom said that blah, 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 blah at the altar. I'm saved. So very gently she stood and rebutted that with, it does not matter what your mom says. Right? And then the tears, and then she sat down and she broke down. And I could tell that at that point the whole thing had shifted to where she was concerned more with his relationship or lack of relationship with God and the false pretenses that he had on that. It was really an odd moment. Made for good times in a small group in my home. But I thought about that, and then it was pretty cool because a couple months later, he actually went to the pastor, and the pastor was out for lunch, and he left a note on the pastor's door, and he says, today's my day. And he comes back, and they talk, and the guy's serving the Lord now, and their marriage is reconciled. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But it's amazing to think, because at that time, this is like 10 years ago or more, something like that, and this guy was in his late 30s at the time, and I'm going, how do we get such a skewed view on our relationship with God and like never let go of that conduit through our parents? And to go, I just can't fathom this happening in adult life, and I cannot fathom this happening in the scope of church people. But then it's always amazing that when we go back and look to Scripture and go, well, here it is. Here it is. Somebody's mom stepping up and saying, Lord, can you make sure that my sons are near to you? And Jesus is like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Number one, you don't realize or fully understand what you're asking. And the second thing is that no one comes to the Father except through me, and nobody comes to me except who's drawn by the Father. Moms, sorry, you're out of the equation. Your salvation is not contingent on your mom. But Jesus goes on and he talks about his kingdom, and he says, look, my kingdom is different. It's not like that. It's not about what family you're born into. It's not about what religion you're born into. You're born into a religious system. I don't understand that, but it's not about that. It's not about your heritage or your culture, right, or your ethnicity. It's not like, oh, well, okay, I'm Jewish, Jesus, you're Jewish, my sons are Jewish, they can chill with you when you become the king, right? No, it doesn't work like that. And he says, but you also don't grasp or fully understand my kingdom. See, and he begins to compare it to kingdoms of the Gentiles or the kingdoms of the world. As he goes on there in verse 25 and in 26, and he says, don't you understand it's that families and the words of other and reputation and all this stuff is what makes people great in the secular world. Our status, our fame, our fortune, our money, our possessions, our media image. He's like, this is what the Gentiles do, guys. This is how earthly kingdoms roll. And he makes the point and comes back and says, that doesn't quite align. In fact, it's just a little bit, like completely different from my kingdom. My kingdom is all about serving one another and loving one another. And it's the lowest of you who does the most, who loves the most, who gives the most, who has the most mercy, who shows the most grace, who loves unconditionally, who's willing to die to self. It is those who are great in my kingdom. It says, whoever's going to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever's going to be first among you must be your slave. He says, I have a kingdom based completely on servanthood. Not off of what your mama said. Completely on servanthood. And then he even makes it more real, more specific to each of us. And he says, even the Son of Man did not come to be served. Jesus didn't come here that we would just completely do for him in that regard. Jesus' first mission in coming here, he even says, is not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus came to lay his life down for each of us. So he tells the mom, he says, you don't understand what you're asking. You're asking your sons to lay down their lives to be in my kingdom. I don't think she got it. But they did. Because ultimately that's what both of those dudes did. Setting that example. You let Teddy know I'm wrapping up. Thanks. Let's go to the book of James. I know I don't have it up there, so you'll just have to believe me. I'm going to go to the 4th chapter of James. If everything from James through Titus wasn't stuck together in my Bible. So I'm going to paraphrase James chapter 4. Yeah, let me get that, man. Thanks. And if this is in King James, I'm going to throw it back at you. This is in James chapter 4. And we get down, well, okay. So right here, the letter being addressed to James is talking about putting aside our earthly passions and our carnal desires and all of this stuff. So it might seem somewhat out of context, but you could go back and read through it all through context. But when we get into, at the, start getting verse 6 here, it says, "But he who gives more grace, therefore," it says, "God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." Verse 7, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And then verse 8, he just draws it home, just right here. He says, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." Isn't that funny how that works? That we don't have to pay money to get into a kingdom to be close to God. We don't have to go out on mission and keep a record of all the good and cool stuff that we did. That we don't have to try and petition with a priest or a pastor or your mom to obtain salvation or to be near to God. It doesn't say go talk to mom and then hopefully then you can be near to God. It doesn't say, hey, go see your pastor and then you could be near to God. And then it doesn't say, it says draw near to God and he draws near to you. And that's the premise of the kingdom of Jesus. Is what other kingdom do you know of, or have you ever even heard of, that any subject at any time, the lowliest of the subject, right? The sinner of all sinners, the murderer, the adulteress, right? The dude who's greedy, who's violent, full of wrath, anger, or whatever, has audience at any time to walk right past the temple guard, right into the courts, right into the throne room, right at the foot of the throne, and have audience with the king. What other kingdom have you ever even heard? I've never even heard of anything like that in a storybook. The stuff that we could even pretend to think up doesn't even exist. There's no kind of kingdom like that. You know, Shrek tries to come to the king, right? To see, Fiona's dad, and it just, even in fairy tales, it's not like that. But man, we're not talking about fairy tales. We're talking about real life, where Jesus said, "Don't worry about mom. Don't worry about the pastor. Don't worry about the priest. Don't worry about the law. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that." Jesus says, "Just draw near to me." And that's all he's asking. Guys, don't we serve an awesome king? We really do. We really do. The book of Hebrews, it tells us that Jesus sits on his throne interceding on our behalf to the Father. And when I look at that, if I close my eyes and I look at that picture, as the throne room is described in Revelation, with the angels and the worshipers and the elders and the throne and the glory and the light and the precious stones, and we look upon the eyes of God, King Jesus standing next to his throne is not my mom. Because she does not need to be there on my behalf. It's so cool that that place that God prepared was for me and for you and for you and for you to be able to come boldly to his throne. Because Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve. That we can come boldly to his throne just simply to receive love from him. So regardless of, I might have just took a picture. So regardless of what, regardless of what anybody says, his throne room's open. It always is. Isn't that cool? So cool. It's amazing the things that Jesus said. If we just hold on to those words, just little bits at a time, just hold on to that, man, our lives completely change. Let's pray and just say, Lord, thank you.